My name is Lisa Pulliam. I am taking COM 132 with the focus on understanding invisible disabilities and wanting to design and create workshops around that. I will be facilitating a conversation with Damian Bramlett, who is a veteran with disabilities, and we'll be discussing some challenges. Would you care to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Damian Bramlett. I spent about 4 years in the U.S. Army as an infantryman. Did a couple tours to Iraq. Got out in 2005 and then pursued higher education after that, and ended up here at San Jose State as a grad student in justice studies. Finished my graduate degree in 2012 and then rolled over into a position with the Department of Veterans Affairs, where I worked with alongside Maggie Morales and a few others to provide services for student veterans here at San Jose State. No longer working here on campus, but I do work for the VA as a research assistant.
So typically when we think of disabilities, we think of some kind of physical impairment. And I'm noticing that you don't have any clear disabilities. Would you care to share some of the disabilities that you have?
I'm sure most of the people in this room are wondering what's up with this guy. Yeah, I'm lucky in that, like other friends of mine that I served with, I have all my arms and legs. I'm not physically deformed, anything like that. But with the advancements in the equipment that they were issuing us overseas, more men and women are surviving traumatic events. And so we have, within the veteran community, it's called the invisible wounds of war. So they could be anything from, for me, I deal with post-traumatic stress disorder, problems with osteoarthritis, hearing loss, ringing of the ears or tinnitus, spinal issues because I've had a few spinal injuries, gastrointestinal problems, and I've dislocated both my hips. They're funny stories, but I'll save those for another time. And so with all of that, it's been a challenge kind of progressing through life, and then I'm finding as I'm getting older, my body's breaking down a lot quicker than, say, friends of mine who never served in the military.
I had noticed that you mentioned post-traumatic stress, and I was wondering how is it adjusting coming back from war to a civilian life, and what are some things you do to manage the post-traumatic stress element?
So that's probably been the biggest factor. I can kind of deal with all of the physical issues like chronic pain and whatever else I deal with on a daily basis, but the post-traumatic stress has been the hardest thing for me to deal with, and even though I've been out like 11 years now, I'm still kind of transitioning in that I still deal with a lot of those symptoms. It's not as bad as it was when I first came here to San Jose State, and I had problems with even getting out of my car to go to class because it was like crowded campus, didn't feel as secure as like a military base would be. Problems with even going up and down staircases without wondering like, okay, is somebody waiting up there to start shooting at me as soon as I come around a corner? Or things like driving down the freeway, and I had a habit for a long time, and I don't do it anymore, but I would speed up coming to an overpass because in Iraq they would do things like wait on overpasses and lob grenades or RPGs or something at vehicles as you're passing under. So a lot of those things, it kind of compounded, and there was a lot of more mental issues that I was dealing with rather than, at least at the time when I first got out, like physical issues. Now it's kind of reversed. Now the mental issues I've gotten counseling and help for, which has gotten better, but the physical issues have kind of worsened over the years.
So I had remembered you speaking at a previous presentation, and you had mentioned creating partnerships with your community, and I'd love for you to share some of the things that you did to work through some of the disabilities that you have.
It varied from one, going through getting help at the VA. I helped co-found the Veteran Student Organization here on campus. So for me, that was probably the biggest piece, was to connect with other veterans that, whether they had the same issues that I had or not, it was still kind of comforting to at least know that I can talk to somebody else I know on campus that's also a veteran. As well as like once I transitioned into my job within the VA, I did a lot of advocating on behalf of veterans. So I really expanded my network in working with people from county positions, state, federal government, what have you, to primarily provide services for other benefits, services for other veterans, just to make sure that they didn't fall into some of the same traps that I fell through while I was here as a student. But at the same time, I would also utilize those services as well. Even though I'm no longer here as a student, I still deal with a lot of the issues that I've had since I've gotten out of the military.
So if people want to be supportive when it comes to talking and interacting with veterans, what are some pieces of advice you would give them?
Well, there's a few things. So one is if you're talking to a veteran, especially for the first time, it might seem pretty obvious, but you'd be surprised how often even I still get these questions. But they'll start asking things like, was it hot overseas? Or where did you go? Or did you kill anybody? Did you see anybody be killed? What was it like getting blown up? You know, that kind of stuff. Because while I understand that people are curious and they want to know, at the same time, it's like asking something very personal that could bring back like some really bad memories for that person. So I would try to stay away from that. Just stick it to something simple like, hey, welcome home, because a lot of veterans have never heard that, even especially Vietnam era veterans and even a lot of current veterans. Other things that you can do as well is if you're ever in that type of a situation where you're talking one-on-one with a veteran that maybe they're bringing up some issues connected to their service, listen non-judgmentally. The biggest thing with veterans, and I'm sure some of you have some family in the room, especially if you have any family that served in war, like the amount of times they've probably ever even talked about their wartime experience, probably almost next to none. And that's usually because the worry is among veterans that they're going to get judged and that you're going to think differently of them. I mean, to this day, my family has no idea what I did in the military. And that's because I do worry about, well, I don't want them to think different of me because I did X, Y, or Z. So that's just a few points of advice that I can give.
So just one real quick question. If people are really curious, what are some ways that you recommend them satiate that curiosity besides asking?
Yeah, I think some of the best ways to do that are through sort of media. There's a lot of really good books out there that have been written by folks who served in the current wars and even past wars. So things like Thank You for Your Service is a really great book. My War, Killing Time in Iraq by Colby Bazell is a really good book. As well as like seek out reputable documentaries. Don't watch the fictional military stuff because those almost never get it right. But films like Restrepo are a good example. And then lastly, you can check out, there's a lot of blogs online that men and women have kept while they've been overseas and currently do. So there's a wealth of knowledge out there if you really want to kind of get a better idea of what life is like, not just in the military, but usually the questions rotate around the theater of war or combat.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
I was wondering what your experience is with working in groups and collaborating in groups in your courses, and what would make a group either more welcoming or effective for each of you, and what to avoid doing when either facilitating a group or for other students not to do to make that space, that group, a better learning experience for everyone.
I think for me, coming from a group perspective as a veteran, I always kind of got made the ad hoc leader of the group because coming from the military, that's all you work in is in a group type atmosphere. So for me, it got a little frustrating after a while of, I don't want to be the leader again. I just want somebody else to do it. They can use the experience, not me, but also kind of touching on what can instructors do to maybe make things a little more, I don't want to say comfortable, but opened up more to veterans is include some kind of like maybe some kind of verbiage in like the syllabus that is kind of vet friendly. Because when I first came here in 2008, the environment still was not very veteran friendly or military friendly whatsoever. A lot of the residual kind of feelings from Vietnam are still sort of around. I think it's changed a lot since then. But some vets do have that kind of mindset or that preconception that maybe they're not going to be welcome on this campus, depending on what the campus politics or climate is like.